to another episode of Wicked Darkness. I'm Kathy, your host, and with me tonight I have Kimba. I have Andrew. I'm reading your thing. Andy, oh my gosh, it's been a long day for me. Andy, I'm sorry. You can yell at me later.
That's fine.
Mika.
Hello.
Steve.
Hello.
Renee.
Hi.
Kevin.
Hello, everybody.
All right, so like I said, we're talking about New Orleans, or how do you say it, Andy?
Nolans.
Nolans.
So it's like, think of it N-A-W, nah.
Okay.
I just have 12 beers and try to say Nolans.
Yeah, Nolans. Nolans.
Like I'm drooling? No.
Yeah, there's no R in there.
That'll help
It's
keep the
definitely
smell
not
out of
you.
your nose, too. You know, you're in the city.
Yeah.
Just keep drinking. You don't have to smell the sewers and the humidity.
Well, and they just had Mardi Gras down there, so it's got to be smelling fantastic
Oh.
right now.
I'm
Oh,
sure.
yeah. The streets, the
garbage on the
bathroom.
streets. Oh, yeah.
I'm assuming they have like beads galore for like weeks on the street, you know, unless they've got a really good cleaning crew.
No, they recycle them. Did you know they recycle them? They've learned and they put recycling bins all throughout Bourbon Street. And so you can take your beads and put them in there, and then they wash them and they package them up and then they resell them. And then the people that are doing that are like, they hire people with special needs or that kind of thing to do that work. And then they get to keep that money. I just saw a story on this.
Wow.
Oh.
Well, I'm glad that they clean them because, you know, I was watching a video today. And one guy had one like going around on his butt, flossing his butt cheeks. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad that they're washing those because I
Gotta
don't know.
clean them.
So remember to not buy used Mardi Gras beads now. I don't care how much they've been cleaned.
I just thought I'd throw that out there since, you know, we're talking about watching videos of Mardi Gras. That was the one that popped up today. And I'm like, yeah.
Run from the beads.
It used to be where you show your chest, but this one took it to a whole new level. And I was just like, all right, okay, well, yeah, I don't want beads. I'm good. I'll bring my own.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
I'm like, no, I don't want, don't put any, like, this isn't Hawaii. Don't put a layer. No, I don't want it around my neck because I don't need like gonorrhea, syphilis, or anything else hanging around my neck. Just, I'm good. Thanks. But it's good to know that, you know, that is the thing that they do down there. I mean, I always wondered how they do that because they're flying around on Bourbon Street and every place else during Mardi Gras, at least the videos that I've seen. Because like I said, I have never been down there, but which is kind of surprising because I've been pretty much everywhere.
They literally come down the street with street sweepers to sweep up all the beads every night.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're dumped into a recycle bin because they literally have street sweepers that collect the beads. I mean, there's so many. It's just inches thick of Mardi Gras beads, both at Halloween and at Mardi Gras. It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then they have the floats too.
That's not even talking about the floats. That's just Bourbon Street.
Wow. So, okay, so Bourbon Street is where they do the parade.
No.
Where do they do the parade?
That's over in Uptown.
Oh.
Because Bourbon Street is not wide enough for the floats to go down. So the parade is different. Parades happen in different parts of town. And Bourbon Street is mostly the walking street.
Oh.
And
that.
But everyone,
I think it used to be like a long, long, long time ago, just on Bourbon Street, but it's just grown into such a huge entity. Like she said, the floats won't fit down there. It goes all around the first quarter.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to understand these floats are so big. They have bathrooms inside the floats.
Holy crap.
Wow.
Like,
literally, holy crap.
Yeah. And
I'm here all night, guys.
Right?
That's interesting.
Hundreds of, like, they typically have about 70 to 200 people on each float.
Holy cow.
I mean, they're huge, and they stand at least 2 stories. And so yeah, the floats are really big. And so there's no way they would fit down Bourbon Street.
Yeah.
So they go down some of those main streets in other parts of the city is where the parade routes are. But Bourbon Street, people will walk down, people will rent out the balconies and stuff to throw beads off of, those sorts of things.
So when did that all actually start? That history of the parade and the beads and all that stuff?
1900s. I don't know the exact dates.
Okay, so it's been a while. They've been doing it for quite a while. It's not something that they started like 1900s or anything like that. It's something that's
right. In the 1800s, they started having the big Mardi Gras balls and those sorts of things. And this new parade, the floats just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Like I said, and now they're so big. And so the parade routes are nowhere near the French Quarter.
Okay.
Kathy, I think you're gonna have to step up your float size for the next parade. We need a bathtub, a shower.
That's what I'm like, holy crap, I don't know
toilet.
if I can do this. This is like,
Just put everybody on the float in summers. Let everybody get on.
yeah. So like Kevin's talking about, we do a parade in Summers, Wisconsin. My husband's a firefighter with Summers, which he's at right now. And they do a parade for 4th of July that we participate in every year. But mine is like a trailer that can fit maybe a car on it. So mine's like,
second story. You could throw the candy from the second story and you don't have to worry about getting hoarded anymore.
I am.
well,
We could do this.
Yeah, we're gonna have to look into this. If anybody knows any kind of like builders or something like that, we might need to get some building material, because we're getting ours is looking kind of shady. I don't know, it's like might have a flag here, a flag there, and woo, and that's about it. So, I mean, the people there, they don't care. They just want our candy. I love the parade. Last time we were in it, we had to dish out 60 pounds of
60
candy.
pounds, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we'll look at beads.
Might get a good discount on the recycled ones.
Well, that's what I'm thinking.
Unwashed, recycled,
I'm sure it's somewhere, on Amazon that I could get the recycled beads, we won't tell the kids. It's fine. That's what they get for mugging us like a half a block into the parade.
Nobody will run for beads or candy ever again.
Right. I mean, I felt like, when we decided we were going to walk it the one year, I never felt so assaulted by children before in my life. Like, is this what famous people feel like when people are like coming around? Because holy crap, I'm not claustrophobic, but these kids, I want to start doing karate chops to get away from them, like.
Maybe that's why they make them 2 stories tall in New Orleans, keep everybody away.
I think they're on something, because
they're onto something.
And they're they've got beads, so they're whipping these things at people. So, people are not coming around.
Crowd control.
Exactly. And so we're talking about New Orleans, we're talking about the LaLaurie Mansion. So she might have been onto something.
I'm telling you.
Dead silence. The people are like, what? Was she just saying. I told you I'm here all night. I'm getting a little punchy here. So was Miss LaLaurie too. Oh, okay. I am so losing it tonight, guys. I'm telling you, you guys are gonna have to carry me on this one. So last week we talked about the mansion. We talked about Delphine. Delphine was Madame Delphine LaLaurie, who was supposedly I wouldn't say serial killer, but
human origami.
Yeah, that's probably best to say it that way. Her and her husband, they had this mansion. They were like socialites, and threw weekly parties. They, had at that time like $4 million. So, they weren't poor by any means whatsoever. They had a mansion that she had purchased the property, built the mansion. She was in charge. That was her baby. They had some enslaved people there that, you get out of line, and the story was that, she was not nice and that she would hurt you, basically. One little girl was combing her hair or brushing her hair and pulled on a knot too hard, and she went chasing after her with a whip, and the girl jumped off the balcony and died. And now supposedly haunts the location. There's another story of a little boy that jumped off the roof and died. Her cook was chained to this basically the stove, and she couldn't go anywhere, and she was afraid that if anything was to happen, that she did something wrong, she would end up on the next floor where bad things happened. And she was like, I don't want that to happen to me, so I'm going to start a fire, and hopefully I'll kill myself, basically, to get out of going to the torture chamber. I mean, these are the things that she was doing to these people. And it didn't end well for Delphine either. So like people that were listening to our last episode, they heard the backstory of the mansion and of Delphine and all of that. If you guys want to hear it, you guys are going to have to listen to episode 1 of season 2, because we're not going to go over all that again. But we're going to dive into more of what happened April 10th, 1832 or 1834, at the location of the LaLaurie Mansion, which was the actual address is 1140 Royal Street, and it's in New Orleans. So you want to go there, you can go there, but you can't walk into the place. You can only walk around on the outside to see the location. It's privately owned. But we didn't talk about what happened. So they had the fire, and they had the fire marshal go in. They found all these horrific things behind this locked door that the LaLauries would not give the keys to, so they had to break down this door, which was not easy to break down. And they went into this location, and they found all these people, and a lot of the people did not end up well. They were tortured and everything, so they ended up taking them out. Jill, or I'm looking at your wife's name on there, Steve. I'm sorry. Steve was I'm telling you, it's going to be a rough one. So Steve was telling how everybody came to see these people on display, basically, to see the horror that was happening behind the doors at the LaLaurie Mansion. And they were there 2,000, 4,000 people?
Yeah, they said 4,000 to 5,000 people
to go see these people on display. And then that's when the horror started. The people were like outraged, and they were just like, how dare they do these awful atrocities to these people, knowing darn well they probably knew something was happening. At least the people that were at the mansion before, they probably knew something was happening, but didn't want to say it because of who these people were. It's the socialites and everything. So they took it upon themselves. They went over and went to the location, to the mansion, and they started a riot. And what happens in riots? They get out of control. And well, the cook started the fire. The riot took care of that and really burnt it down to the ground, because they were able to save the mansion all the way up until that point. And then the rioters went in. They destroyed things. The family, the LaLauries, were able to get out of the home and flee for their lives. but the rioters went into the home and they broke the windows and, took things that the family had left behind. And they basically destroyed it as much as they possibly could and tried burning it to the ground. Which they were able to get. What was it, Steve? Part of the first floor was saved.
Yeah, part of the first floor.
Okay.
Not much though.
Now, do you guys know if the slave quarters was that destroyed at all?
And I don't know about that because remember I had said I think the last episode that Jack Osborne and his partner went to do the investigation there. They were the first group let in to do that. And and I was just reading it just a couple seconds ago that the room where they got the most experience out of and feelings was in the old slave quarters. So I'm just from that, I'm assuming it was saved.
Okay.
But they said that's what they were feeling, the cold spots. Went into that. That's the area that they felt the most dread. They were getting intelligent responses, knocking responses to questions. One knock for yes, two knocks for no, that kind of thing. But they specifically said that room, the old slave quarters, was the actual area that they felt was the most active.
Okay. Renee and Mika, have you guys heard of this story before we started talking about it at all?
Yeah, I listened to the podcast a few months ago, various ones on different podcasts of the supernatural. But otherwise, beyond that, all I got is from that.
Okay.
Renee? Yeah, I hadn't heard of it until you talked about it before. And so I kind of did a deep dive into, researching and reading stuff about the mansion. And I actually watched that the Jack Osborne Portals to Hell episode.
Did you? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it was really interesting. And that kind of started from there going into various YouTube videos and then reading articles and stuff. So it's really interesting how the story came about and then her eventual disappearance. And then it kind of went, kind of goes from there. So it's a really interesting story.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I didn't. Oh, sorry. As I said, I didn't know about it at first either. We were there to see the crypts and a whole bunch of other sites in New Orleans. And huge shout out to Verdi Marty. It's a little deli place where we were going to get sandwiches. It was probably midnight. The guy's like, "Hey, what's across the street?" Because we were talking about why we're in town, and that's the only way I knew about it. It just wasn't as advertised as all of the cemeteries. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, why isn't there more going on here? But since it is privately owned, that kind of takes away the ability to go and view it, which a lot of things in New Orleans you can, with the exception of when COVID, they locked up a lot of the cemeteries because you couldn't be more than 6 feet apart. We were there the year after COVID, and a few of them we had to tour from the outside. So yeah, if you get a chance to go, check the Odd Fellows Cemetery if it's open again. Yeah, there's so much to see there.
Now, Kevin, when you go down there, you've taken tours down there for your job, and then you do it
personally. And I've been there personally as well.
Yeah. So have you taken people on a tour of the location, not inside, but outside? Did you ever take anybody there for that or?
Yes. My first experience with the LaLaurie Mansion, I was there on my own. Well, not on my own. I had two friends with me, and we were visiting the city. So it wasn't on one of my tours. It was just a personal tour. And we were down there a long time ago now, like I want to say 10 years ago now. And we were taking a history tour around the city. And as we came up the street, my friend and I both immediately whipped around. We both saw and heard screaming, and I stopped dead on the sidewalk, and the tour guide started chuckling, and he goes, "What did you see?" I said, "Well, I both of us like, well, I swear that I heard screaming. I turned around and I saw somebody jump from the balcony." And he said, "That's interesting. That's the LaLaurie Mansion. Let me tell you about this place." And so that was my very first experience with the LaLaurie Mansion. And then he proceeded to tell us the history and said, "You're absolutely correct. That somebody jumped from there, and this is what happened," and and told us the whole story. And so since then, I've been in New Orleans, walked down the street often. Every time I'm there, I see or hear something. I have taken groups on ghost tours around the city, and they usually will walk you past the LaLaurie Mansion, of course, because it's terrifying and fascinating. And I also have a friend who is a guide in New Orleans, and the LaLaurie Mansion is one of those places that he talks about but avoids. That it's, from the locals, it's kind of like it's kind of bad juju kind of thing to engage it, as it were. So I've had a couple of sort of different experiences, but yeah, that was my very first experience with LaLaurie Mansion, was seeing and hearing the screaming. And so I am a firm believer in everything that happened there.
Well, and that's funny that you say that, because like they talked about, there was a medium that went there, and the medium, and this is from Ghost City Tours. So they're a group that does tours down there of the mansion, and they talk about a medium that read the house and said that before they even knew anything about the history, of what had happened behind doors or whatever, the medium's like, there's a lot of sadness. And she said that, pulling her phone out, she snapped a picture, and she said there's a bricked up window. But she says that's not where the little girl fell out of. So they say that there's a window.
There's doors out that go out onto the balcony.
Yeah, and she said that's not where she ended up jumping from. She did sense that there's a little boy that likes to play pranks on the living. And then there's a little girl who is often very nervous, which I'm assuming is the one that jumped to her death because she was afraid that she was going to get hurt. She was the one that was brushing her hair. But she did say whatever happened there does not visit the home any longer. So whoever was there at the time does not really haunt the location. But it's interesting that, there's the little boy and the little girl, that apparently they're stuck there. But the little boy, he seems to be an intelligent haunt, and the little girl seems to be like a residual haunt. For those that don't know what that means, is an intelligent haunt means that they can interact with you. And, they can do things like you ask them to knock, like you knock on the door or whatever, they'll knock. A residual one is more like a tape recorder that keeps going over and over and over. No matter what time of day or whatever, whenever it had happened, it had soaked up all that energy into that location, and it just plays no matter if you're there or not. It's just going to just keep doing the same thing over and over. It's in a loop. So it sounds like she might be in that loop, like a residual, and he sounds like he's more of an intelligent. But that's just going off of what people had said here. I can't say for sure. So maybe what you saw of the little girl, maybe that was, or the person that was falling from the balcony, that might have been that little girl that you just were there at the right time and that was happening. And you were just lucky enough to witness it.
I've heard people say that they'll be walking past there and they think it's the little boy will like tug on their sleeve. And so I've heard people say that.
Yeah, there was one that I saw in there that the tour guide felt like they were being tugged on. Another one that was kind of strange, though, this tour guide was taking them around, and they were she had to position her group under a set of street lamps that were burnt out for weeks. So they hadn't been working at all. And she is, telling her story, taking the group around, but they stopped under these street lamps. And then she said, as she started launching the story, not even like a minute into talking about the little girl, the lamps all flickered on. And then everyone kind of like paused, like, what the heck just happened? Because these lights weren't on and now they're on. And then no sooner that, she was talking about the little girl again, the lamps blew out. So, and the light was just gone. So it was like she's telling the story. Okay, this was what happened when she was brushing Delphine's hair, and then she got in trouble, and Delphine started chasing her. The lights popped on, and then the little girl tried to get away from Delphine and jumped off the balcony, and lights went out because she was no longer here. I don't know. Could it's a good story. Was it a glitch? Like all of a sudden, like there was a loose wire, and then all the street lamps came on. I don't know, but it's kind of a coincidence that that all happened all at the same time, that they're talking about a little girl that passed away, and lights were on, bright, future, and then snuffed out. Kind of strange. We said that the home is a privately owned home now, but it had history. It was not just, it was the family home of the LaLauries, but it also was like a girls' home, like a girls' school. It was, what else? Wasn't it? I gotta look back at my story. Anybody know the complete story of all the things it used to be?
I thought it was apartments at one time too.
Yeah, apartments was another thing.
Did it have something to do with like a food? I want to say like a shelter or
yes, you're right.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I read that. You're right.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to go through my notes here and see what all was there. So they were talking, like the girls, when it was a girls' school, the girls were saying that there was something there and that they experienced it. But then somebody's like, well, was it really something haunting the location, or was it the girls playing pranks on each other? Like, you go in that closet for a minute and see how long you can stay in there. You got to stay in there for the minute. But if you come out, that just means that the ghost got you and scared you and you had to come out, stuff like that.
I apologize for what's about to happen. Hey, go lay down. Go lay down. Sorry.
No, it's okay, because mine's doing the same thing right behind me, and I'm like trying to play it off, but
Mine were being loud though. Mine are really loud.
my one's sitting here staring at me like, I'm being a good girl. Look at me. Yeah, I see you. Yes, you're being a good girl. Your brother and sister are not. She's got to come up and say hi. Say hi. There you go. There you are. Okay, you're a good girl.
That's funny.
So yeah, you're not the only one. Okay, now you're not being so good. Scotty, see, edit. This is great. I can edit things.
Yeah.
Do you see her popping in and out of this thing? She's just like attacking me. Andrew! I don't even know where my child is. Hold on a second. Now mine are like attacking. Okay. Go outside, please. Oh, no wonder he's not answering. He's not even in his room. Hi. Just letting mine outside right now.
Oh, wow. I found interior pictures of the mansion, and I will put the website in chat.
Ooh.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Is that the renovation in 2013 that they did with the new owners that own it now from Texas?
I saw one picture of that, but I don't remember if it was on this website, and it doesn't have a lot, but it's pretty darn interesting.
There's an
Oh.
article on NOLA.com that will that shows you a lot of pictures of the inside of the house after the renovation in 2013. Now it's a more of a like interior design article. It's not really that much about
Gotcha.
all the supernatural stuff, and it even goes on to say that the interior decorator didn't even really notice anything, and none of her workers did, but the caretaker of the house has noticed things, and she's got her own story. But you can see the inside of the house, at least back in 2013. It's pretty cool. She did a good job.
Yeah, creepy dog picture in a
I
good
know
way.
that the
Yeah.
mansion had been used, like you said, as a boarding school. It was used as a music
Right.
conservatory.
Hmm.
It had been a furniture store at one point. So it's been.
Yeah, this article even says it was a bar at one time. It was a pub, but he had to
Yeah.
close in like 2 years because I don't know why. Probably hauntings. No, I don't.
Yeah.
Is it currently apartments or is it a family home?
It's privately owned by a music producer.
Oh.
The name I've not heard. I'd have to go find it again, but he was the one that bought it after Nicolas Cage went bankrupt.
His Waylon.
Yeah.
His name is Waylon.
I also read that he's hardly ever there. He has 2 caretakers, but he rarely ever shows up there.
What a shame.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be nice if you would open it up to people so they can, experience it. I mean, obviously you don't want to have people destroying your home, but
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it would be a good opportunity just to see how nice they've made the house
right.
and what's left that they
Well,
haven't
if you
changed.
watch that Portals to Hell, I think it's called, the house is very nice. I mean, it's fixed up really, really nice. I think they weren't allowed to go to all the rooms in the house,
Right.
but most of them.
And the episode's also from 2019, so I mean it's the most recent
Yeah.
that anyone's been
And
in
as
there.
far as I know, that's the only paranormal investigation that ever went on.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. It's a pretty interesting watch.
So if he's not there, then he's got the caretakers. I wonder if the caretakers have any stories themselves.
Yes, they did. They did. They told.
They did.
Did they?
Yeah. It's a mother and daughter, I believe, that are the caretakers.
Okay.
And they said they experience whispers and footsteps and knocks and that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
And they said there's some areas they just don't like to go into by themselves.
Yeah.
They didn't seem like they were super afraid to be there, but they just said there's some areas that make them uncomfortable. And you could tell that with I can't think of the woman's name that investigates with Jack Osborne, but you could tell there was that she felt uncomfortable too in some parts of that house before even he did.
So the family, the Delphine and her husband or children, so I don't think maybe her husband went as well. They fled after the whole thing. So they really didn't go on trial for anything, really. They fled to France because his family is from France. And they kind of hung out there. Like we were talking before, she had the two daughters that were still in the home with her, but her other children were older and they seemed to stay. Delphine, she wasn't happy about leaving, because she was born in the United States, but it wasn't the United States really at that point. I mean, it was, but not. It was the Spanish thing, that Spanish colony that she grew up in. But she was born there, and she fled to France, and she didn't want to stay there. She was adamant that she wanted to go back to the States. And her children are like, do you not remember why you left in the first place? You come back here and they're going to, hang you. And so they had it where technically they have her listed as her death was December 7th, 1849 at the age of 62. She got to live a long life for back in that time period. But they said that she was in Paris when she passed away and she was buried there. But there were things that I saw that she was buried in Paris, and then they ended up bringing her body back, like digging her up, bringing her body back, and she was supposed to be buried in what is
Cemetery 1? Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's where she was supposed to be buried at. But today I watched a little thing saying that she was not dead. She actually came back to the United States.
In theory.
She was going something with her brother, and she was dealing with all that. But she was not dead when they said that she was dead. So there's a controversy of, did she or did she not actually die in 1849?
Well, I can say in New Orleans, they don't bury people because of the extreme heat and them being under sea level. So if you try to put somebody in the ground, the water will bring them back up. So that's why they have the mausoleums, and it'll be like a family mausoleum. And it gets so hot and humidity is so high that they essentially cremate inside the mausoleum. So that's why you could have, 50 people in one mausoleum, because they cremate. So it just seems weird to me that they would bury her. You know what I mean? Like, you can't really do that in New Orleans. So,
right.
Then why do they say that there's bodies of some of the slaves that were killed buried in the backyard of that estate?
I actually just in October took a lecture in New Orleans about burial practices. And you can bury people in certain parts of the city. And so there are burials that happen in certain parts of the city. Other parts of the city, obviously, because of the sea level, they can't. And so it just honestly depends on the cemetery as to whether they can do actual burials or not.
There are some people actually buried in the ground of Cemetery 1, but they're Protestant. Because whatever they believe that, you couldn't be buried above ground, that was sacrilegious. But I think I remember them saying that they had to like cement or do something to that burial, like they could, just so they didn't come floating back up. Because they're in Cemetery 1, they're in a different part. Like, so the St. Louis is all Catholic.
Catholics had two different practices of burial. And like you said, the mausoleum type burials, you would pay to be like your different organizations and groups, the Eagles, the Knights Columbus, whatever, those different organizations that you belong to. You would have a membership basically to be buried there. And so, and again, it came down to, were you Catholic or you Protestant? And they had the two different kinds of burials based on those beliefs. So, yes, we think that there aren't below ground burials in New Orleans, but there are.
Interesting. So she was buried under her maiden name though.
Hmm.
She didn't go with her married name or any of her married names. So apparently whoever is there is supposed to be under her maiden name in Cemetery 1. Is it actually her? Maybe, I'm sure eventually it was, but did she die? Because they didn't have a lot of good record keeping back then, as opposed to nowadays. I mean, they did, but not to the extent that they have now. But there is documentation of her with the property of, her brother, that she was dealing with that. So I don't know. That's still up in the air. Maybe she's the one that's haunting the place, but she definitely was not brought back. Like she was not welcome back at all. And like I said, there's not a lot of information about what happened to her.
Mm-hmm.
Her children and other relatives, had been, telling her, do not make these plans. Don't come back, because you're not gonna like it. It's not gonna be pretty for you. Knowing them, they probably have some kind of, story that, they're gonna peel her face off, or, put the ants in the honey and all that. I don't know. But, they do, they still talk about the abuse and the murder to this day. But here's the thing. Did she actually do it? Did she really cause, or her and her husband cause all these problems? Did they actually mutilate these people? And why I say that is because now they had newspapers back then, obviously, but they had one that was called the New Orleans Bee newspaper. And that was back, during that time period that she lived, but that was like the equivalent of the National Enquirer.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but that's a great news source.
it is, because they talk about Bigfoot and aliens, and according to, Men in Black, that's actually the real news. So we've all been reading the wrong newspaper all these times anyway.
Elvis is still alive.
That's another thing to watch too. So don't get me started on that one either.
But I think most newspapers back in that time period, though, were very much geared towards like social calendars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they documented a lot of like who was leaving the area, who was visiting who. And so you get those early, because that's how people got their news, right? It's like, okay, Miss Smith is going to visit her sister in Florida.
Yeah.
Or, someone's taking a respite because of whatever, they're not feeling well, so they're going to a warmer climate. Something like that. And you saw a lot of that in the newspapers in Wyoming. So I'm wondering if it was to sell newspapers. So did they embellish a lot of it and kind of like,
Well, and that's the thing, because they did say, a lot of the newspapers back then did say that the enslaved people were kept in poor conditions. So, they did come and talk to Delphine and say, look, you are not treating them the way you're supposed to. This is the city ordinance. This is how they're supposed to be treated, and you are not following that. He warned her. So, she was on the radar. So the New Orleans newspaper, though, they're the ones that were saying that the slaves were tortured. They were the ones that said that some of them appeared to be in the medical experiments and stuff like that. And so, this is 1830s.
Mm-hmm.
Did they actually embellish things? Then, to go even further, though, there was a person that wrote about the stories and stuff like that. So there was a Sunday magazine section in the New Orleans Times on February 4th, 1934, saying that the whole story, the slaves being experimented on and mutilated, was a result of a smearing campaign. that was put up by this person. So there was this neighbor of Delphine's, and this neighbor lived right next door when the fire broke out. So he was there during that time period. And he had said that he was there for years before that. He suffered from an unfortunate bout of he fell in love with Delphine, but Delphine didn't fall in love with him. And it was one of those, you're not going to take my gifts of, love and everything and return it back to me. So I'm going to destroy you and everything that you hold dear. And so he was the one that went to this newspaper and said, this is what happened to these slaves. They were doing experiments on them and stuff like that. So he said that there were other people that were there, other neighbors, who said, no, that is not who she was. We had watched her no, these are people that were in the home at different times, say that she indulged her slaves. And these are supposed to be her friends, saying that she would hand them half empty wine glasses at dinner, and who were waiting behind her chair, because that's what they would do, wait until you're done eating, and then they would take the stuff away, and insist that they drink the wine, and that her coachmen were fed as well. So like, here, you haven't had anything, we have leftovers, take this, eat this. And the little girl who was supposedly chased by her and through the house and whatever, said that whoever leaped fleeing from her was actually sliding down a curving banister, playing and telling or fell off the banister and hit the marble floor, and that's what killed her. So it wasn't that she jumped off. She was playing around like any little kid would do, and okay, let's slide down. I did that in my house when I was growing up. Slide down the thing and hope that you land on your feet. But she fell and hit the marble flooring and basically got a fracture of her head, and she died. And so they buried her on the grounds. So it wasn't something that, she chased her throughout the house and then the girl leapt to her death. It wasn't until there's another story in the 1940s that's where they went and took the information they found in the newspaper and went even farther. And it wasn't until that time period that those stories manifested with what these people looked like. And that it wasn't outside the possibility that the townspeople found the slaves in poor condition inside. But when the guy came, the lawyer came to talk to her about it or whatever and said, you got to straighten things up. That's when they wonder if things went a little bit awry, like, okay, some of the secrets got out, so I'm going to destroy her or whatever. Another theory was that Delphine watched her father be executed by his slaves. That he was, she watched a father and some other male relatives who had mistresses who were free women of color, that they were missing their skins and their heads were drilled into poles. And that she just held that inside until she was an adult, and then she took it out on the people that she enslaved. Those are different stories that were out there. So is that a possibility? Maybe. I don't know.
It's strange that you hear that the slaves looked to be starved for the ones that they had found.
Mm-hmm.
She left New Orleans because she was chased out of the city, and it didn't seem like she really made a campaign to defend herself. I never heard anything of the like.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's true. I mean, I don't know. It kind of just, there's so many stories out there. Which one do you believe? Did she do it? Did she not do it? For a person that didn't do anything, she was all hell bent on coming back to her home. So was she actually the victim of slander?
Oh, but you have the fire chief and the police chief that would have had eyewitness accounts of what was going on the second floor.
But is she,
Yeah.
are they going by that because she didn't pad their pockets with money?
Well, there is always that.
Like, the lawyer came in, said that things weren't up to par to get it up to par because there were some complaints, but did she not pad their pockets with some money, keep them happy or whatever? And because of that, they felt, okay, you know what? You've got all this money and you're throwing it around in everybody's faces, but you're not throwing it in our direction. We'll take care of you. And we'll make sure that you never step foot in this town again.
I'd be curious if there's a newspaper report of the people that they rescued from the house and put on display.
Yeah.
Because that would solidify the torture at least.
Right.
Right. Well, I put a link in the chat from newspapers.com of an article that gives several reports from like the New Orleans Courier, the New Orleans Mercantile Advertiser, from the New York Journal of Commerce, and it's like they brought all the stories into one, and so it talks a little bit about what they found, and there's like 3-4 different versions of what they found when the fire broke out and what the state of the slaves were.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's interesting, and there's like a parallel a lot with some of it, and then there's other instances that you're reading and you're like, okay, well, this story says it, but this one doesn't. So which is it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, none of us were there.
Right.
And like we know, newspapers nowadays, the news channels nowadays, one will say one thing, one will say the other. It just depends. And I'm not going to go political on anything, but I'm just saying, you say one thing and then somebody's like doesn't agree with you, so they change the story just a little bit to go with what they want, or they change it the other way, and I'm sure that happened back then too. It's one of those, the neighbor didn't like me because I did X, Y, and Z, so I'm going to tell the newspaper I saw this through the windows because we're right there and I can see everything in the window. But I'm going to change it a little bit so I sound like, I'm the good guy and she's a bad guy. I don't know. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I have no idea. I wasn't there. So I can't say one way or the other if this actually happened or not. Because we've had it where other people, even nowadays, people are, sentenced life in jail for a murder that, 30 years later, they find out, no, they really did not commit that murder. Somebody else did, but nobody wanted to listen or do the time to investigate properly. And so this person's been sitting in jail for 30 years innocently. They didn't do anything wrong. And the person that did has been walking around free for 30 years. I mean, it happens all the time. Mm-hmm. So could that have happened back then too? Or she had those slaves, they got rid of the slaves and the cousin brought the slaves back, I don't know. Steve, what do you think? You're kind of quiet right now.
No, I don't know. I think in all kinds of myths and legends and everything else, there's some kind of truth behind everything. So I think something definitely happened. I think they saw probably some not very nice things, but was there crab people crawling around? I don't know. Is that just part of the whole myth thing? But it's like anything, where you tell one person a secret in their ear and it goes down the line, and by the time it's at the end, it's just this totally different meaning, is that what happened? I don't know. I think there's some truth to this, and I think there's some embellishment to the whole thing.
Well, and I mean, just think about any time like we were in high school and two kids would get in a fight in the hallway, and then all of a sudden it turned into this one bashed the other one's head in, and everybody's, I was there and I saw it, and just to get the attention and so they would make up the stories or embellish it, and like Steve said, then by the time the story was ending, they were killing each other with knives, just completely. Fabrication, but was there some truth to it? Yeah, the kids did get into a fight, but it wasn't nearly as bad as the other kids made it out to be. And it's probably the same thing in New Orleans. Did they treat them bad? Yeah, probably. Did a lot of slave owners back then treat their slaves bad? Yeah. So there were laws against it and they got caught. But now it's like you said, the neighbor old lady on the street wants somebody to pay attention to her, so she's gonna say, I saw a crab lady. So yeah, that's probably what Steve said is probably close to the truth.
And, I know that I was talking about the medium saying that nobody that was basically tortured back then still resides in the home as a spirit or anything like that. But I find that very hard to believe that if you were that tortured, that a part of you wasn't still there in those four walls.
Right.
Like, how do you, you were physically tortured, you were psychologically tortured, emotionally tortured, and you're telling me not a piece of your soul is still stuck there in torture. I've been doing this a long time where it's not out of the norm for them to have a piece of them still in that, and to say that there was that many that this happened to, that now it's just a little boy and a little girl and that's it. There should be more. And the place is 200 years old. So there should be a lot more going on there, because 200 years, you figure how many people have gone in and out of those buildings or that building, and none of their energy stayed whatsoever.
I think that in that Portals to Hell episode, I think, and Renee, maybe you remember, but I think all the responses they got were positive responses asking if they were slaves of the in that household, and I believe most of the responses they got were yes, they were slaves that were still there.
Yeah.
Is that right, Renee? Do you remember it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't even think, I think the little girl came up, but I don't think the little boy did. It was mostly the responses from slaves, as it said.
Yeah.
And so there's an imprint that's left when there's, horrific things that have happened, in buildings, and, there's to only be two people or two reported, spirits. Yeah, I agree, Kathy. There's got to be more that are in there.
Right. Just the history itself, the land, soaking up all that energy, and that's a lot of bad energy that was there. It doesn't make any sense that it's just that those two.
Right.
I'm not saying that there can't be just two. There could technically be two. It just sounds kind of fishy, and I've told you guys before, like, my home is haunted, and my home is only 70 years old, not even close to 200 years old. And mine is like what I call a stagecoach stop. So I have the ones that reside with us, but then I have other ones that come and go through the location throughout the years. And they stop for a little bit and they, make their little presence known, and then they head on out to the next location. And I wouldn't be surprised if that actually happens there too, because, it's just the city itself is just teeming with spirits. It's not like Savannah where it's built on the bones of people, but it's pretty darn close. And
that's what I was going to say is New Orleans, there's so many reports, so many incidences, so many stories of slaves, of these spirits that continue to haunt in these different homes and these different buildings in the city, that you have to go, well, are they everyone from the LaLaurie Mansion? Is it somebody passing through? Because there's just so much haunting in that city and so many people have so many stories from all these different buildings. So it's hard to believe that, like you said, it would only be two, souls still lingering about.
Right. I mean, even if it was just the two, if it was just the two on the outside, there had to have been more on the inside, or vice versa, because the land itself is just old. It's just old. They got a lot of history there. And the water is right there. And if anybody knows anything about paranormal world, the field itself, water carries a lot of energy. And so they're right there on the water. In fact, like we said, they're below the water line. So, I've been in a location where they had a running spring underneath the building. And when I opened up the trap door, I could see the water, and my equipment was just going off the chart because of the water flow. So I can just imagine how New Orleans is. Because I've dealt with Charleston, same thing. They're below sea level. And so they flood a lot too. Not to the extent that New Orleans will, but they've had their share as well. And same thing. It's, there's energy all over. The ocean's right there. And, like I said, New Orleans is right there on the Gulf. So they've got waterways everywhere. So that I could see, the spiritual activity just spiking.
Yeah.
So if anybody is able to get into the location, have at it. Good luck. I hope you can. I wish we could, but that's not a location that we're going to be able to go to, because I don't think the guy's going to allow any paranormal team to go in. But maybe you become friends with this guy, and maybe you're a musician and you're able to get in with him. I don't know. More power. If you get in with them, great. Tell your stories with it. If you've ever visited the location, you can always email us your stories. We'd be happy to hear them or any kind of experience that you had. But I think the LaLaurie Mansion's going to be there. It's been there for 200 years. I don't think it's going to go anywhere anytime soon. It made it through a lot of hurricanes throughout the past. And she's still, kicking. So I think more stories will probably come out, as it's getting more, famous. Cause like I said, none of us really heard of it unless you actually went down there. And even then, it's the locals got to talk about it. And if the locals don't talk about it, then it doesn't exist.
Yep.
So, on that note, I think we kind of have touched everything we possibly could for the LaLaurie Mansion. And the mystery behind its history is still out there. Maybe someday, Delphine herself will come back and tell her story. But I think she's kind of muted herself on that one. Or at least her family has. But until next time, our famous words of let our skeptics keep us grounded and our believers keep believing. Kathy, you guys have a great night.
Night.
Cheers.
Bye.